So a very good afternoon to all of you, and a very hearty welcome to this press conference by Jonny Best, Jonathan Lindsay Best, popularly known as Jonny Best, at this Golden Jubilee edition of the 50th Golden Jubilee edition of the International Film Festival of India, IFFI. So as many of us would recall, film, when it started as a form of entertainment which did not have sound. And the only sound which used to be a part of the film was the music accompaniment by an esteemed music composer when the film was being played. However, over time, with the advent of sound film, this aspect of silent film viewing faded into insignificance. And this year's IFFI, it seeks to restore and remind us of this forgotten significance of silent film, and hence, by extension, the power of silence in our lives. So it's a humble privilege to have with us Jonathan Lindsay Best, Jonny Best, who knows how best to give expression to this sound of silence, along with the playing of a film. Popularly known as Jonny Best, he is a renowned musician, academician, and festival director, specializing in music for silent film. And the master pianist, as you know, has already performed live at the screening of Battleship Potemkin, a 1925 film by the Russian master filmmaker and pioneer of montage editing, Sergei M. Eisenstein. He will also be performing today at the screening of Pandora's Box, a 1929 movie by the German master filmmaker, by the German expressionist master G.W. Pabst, and master of suspense. And he will also be performing at the screening of Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail, a 1929 film tomorrow. So I hope that all of you would be joining for the screenings of these two movies, which these three classics are being screened at IFFI as part of a tribute which IFFI is giving to the lost, or the, I would say, faded art of silent film. And Jonny has also told, Best has also told that his performance at the Battleship Potemkin was a very good experience for him. He found the Indian audience to be highly energetic, as opposed to some of his experiences in the UK. And we have also come to know that the performance was really inspiring and really an enjoyable one. So if I may say a little more about Best, he has been performing regularly at festivals and venues around the UK. He has performed 4 times at Leeds International Film Festival, and he made his debut at Hippodrome Silent Film Festival in 2018. And he began performing improvised piano accompaniments for silent film since 2014. And in 2016, he founded the Yorkshire Silent Film Festival, which has had 3 editions, each of them bringing live scored silent film to cinemas, theatres, and village halls across Yorkshire. And now the Yorkshire Silent Film Festival will take place once every 2 years, starting from May 2020. He is also a researcher, as I have just mentioned sometime before. His PhD at the University of Huddersfield Music Department is a phenomenological study of silent film piano improvisation. He is also researching keyboard accompaniments of the silent era, and he has presented the latest stage of this work at the Royal Musical Association annual conference in Bristol in September 2018. He teaches in the University of Huddersfield Music Department, and he conducts masterclasses and workshops regularly. He has a particular interest in the pedagogy of improvisation. He is a Clore Fellow and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a member of the Royal Musical Association. We are all very privileged and grateful to have you here for enabling IFFI to pay tribute to the art of silent film, and we look forward to the two screenings which are yet to be there. Now I would request Jonny Best to share his experience at IFFI so far. It is exploration into the art of fusing music and silent film, the questions which you have been exploring, and the answers which you have found. Okay. Over to you, please.
Thank you very
yes.
much. Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Do I need to press something? Is that working?
Oh, yeah.
Is it working now? Oh, now it's working. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you very much. I've been made incredibly welcome by everyone over the last few days, and I'm really grateful. So what I do is essentially create instant, spontaneous music for silent films. So whereas a film composer might spend 6 weeks writing music for a modern feature film, maybe spending 6 weeks writing 30, 40 minutes of music for a film, I improvise, which is just a fancy word for make up on the spot, the entire score, sitting at the piano in front of the audience. So 2 hours of music takes me 2 hours rather than the time spent composing. So it's all about performing completely spontaneously. What I will tend to do, as I did last night, is have a think to myself about the sort of music that I plan to make. I will think about where I want to begin the score, the particular idea I'll begin with. But then I am watching the film with the audience and trying to express it musically along with the audience, watching it and feeling it with the audience, and creating music at the moment of performance. So it's always different. Every film is different. And every time I go back to a film I know, it's different. It has to be different because one can't keep an hour and a half or 2.5 hours tonight of spontaneously made music in the mind. So it's whatever I do, it's always unrepeatable, and it's only there for that performance, that audience. There are a number of pianists who specialize in this sort of work. Not that many. There aren't a huge number of us, but there's half a dozen in the United Kingdom. And we all do it quite differently. And what we do is very different from the way silent films were scored in the silent era. So in the 1920s, when these films were released, the music tended to be made out of bits and pieces of existing music, all sort of stuck together to create a patchwork score. Improvisation, as such, didn't quite exist among pianists in the way that it does today. So today's silent film pianists are, in some ways, reinventing the silent era traditions, but in quite different ways. The films would sound quite different if you sort of travelled back in time to the 1920s or the 1910s. The 3 films we have here at IFFI are 3 complete classics, 3 utter masterpieces, which is a good way to start, I think, with silent film. You can't really get better than Eisenstein, Pabst, and Hitchcock. Last night's film, of course, is one of the revolutionary moments in cinematography, especially in film editing. And tonight's film is a complex, subtle, and really beautiful and ambiguous film of dark passions and resentments and destruction. It's a sort of fascinating black melodrama, and of course stars the great Louise Brooks in one of the 2 great films she made with Pabst, the other one being Diary of a Lost Girl, a film she made over a 2-year period that are really the thing she's most known for today, the basis of her fame today. She's a remarkable actor, often doing very little on the screen. She always said that she wasn't really acting, she was just being. She's a beautifully simple performance, but if you come to the film tonight, you'll see that you can't take your eyes off Louise Brooks. She's utterly fascinating. And that's one of the great pleasures of accompanying silent films, because in a way, what we do when we make music for silent films is collaborate with the actors on the screen, trying to work with them to communicate the performance, to communicate the acting performance. And sometimes musically does that by being very simple, very, very quiet, not getting in the way, and sometimes you have to do a lot. But it's these collaborations with great performers, great actors, which for me are the real pleasure of accompanying silent films. And it's a real privilege, obviously, to make music for Louise Brooks. And the film tomorrow night is an absolutely wonderful Alfred Hitchcock film. It is his last silent film, and it was Blackmail, it's called. And it was made absolutely on the cusp of silent film turning into sound film. So halfway through the shoot, sound technology was being rolled out to cinemas across the United Kingdom and the United States, big cities first. And so the film was shot a second time. Basically, it's the plot of Singing in the Rain, if you know the film Singing in the Rain, the Gene Kelly film. The film was being shot as a silent film. Halfway through, it's like, oh dear, this is going to be old-fashioned. Sound film is happening. So they finished the silent film and then made a sound film version, which was almost entirely reshot. And both films exist today. They're fascinating to compare, and with the same cast and very different use of a very interesting use of sound in the sound version of Blackmail. But tomorrow night we'll be seeing the silent version, and I think it's one of the very best silent films ever made, and one of Hitchcock's greatest achievements. A wonderful thriller with all of the familiar Hitchcock trademarks in the film. So it's three wonderful films, and I would just like to say that the audiences here in IFFI have been, I mean, my audience last night was just remarkable, absolutely wonderful, and incredibly noisy, which I really like. You know, because sometimes audiences in Britain, we can be very polite, you know, don't want to. But last night it was just really, really exciting, and I was thrilled to feel that the audience was just right there enjoying the film and loving the experience, and I was really grateful for that, for the way they expressed that last night. So that meant a lot.
So thank you for sharing
Yes, there you go.
your experience.
I can talk forever.
No, it's, I just what you said just prompts me to ask you, when the audience gets excited and actively involved, how does it influence your music?
Yeah, well, it does, because, you know, I'm a human, and, you know, when you hear people enjoying the experience, it's that feedback is enthusing. It makes you feel good, you know. And when you're improvising music, it's a very sort of holistic, spontaneous thing to do, and so just getting that sense of positivity back from the audience, it's fuel in the tank, you know. It was lovely. Of course, if you're playing a comedy, then the audience hopefully is making noise all the way through with laughing. If you're playing a comedy and there's no noise, then something is wrong. But when you play a very serious drama, sometimes you don't hear a peep out of the audience until the end, because they're really intensely focused. And that's a sort of different kind of attention. So last night's film was a sort of mixture of the audience being really focused on the film, and then sometimes them sort of taking a moment to applaud in the middle of a scene, which doesn't happen very often, but it's lovely. So yeah, it's great to get feedback. It's great.
We're also happy to have you at the Golden Jubilee edition itself.
It's a huge honor. It's a pleasure.
So I would request now the audience to ask your questions.
Well, Jonny, how do you differentiate between composing music for a silent movie with that of composing music for a sound movie or mainstream movie?
Well, I don't compose. I only improvise. So I've not composed music for modern films. They're related crafts, but significantly different. I mean, the thing about improvising is that you can't take anything back. You can't revise anything. Everything that you do is done, and there's nothing you can do to undo it. So there's a particular sort of mental space that one has to get into to improvise, which is about feeling free and feeling happy with whatever happens, you know. And if something doesn't go exactly as you want it to, you forgive yourself instantly and keep moving forwards with the film. Now, a composer can sit there changing things, choosing this note or that note, building something up, sort of like architecture. So the mental space, the sort of psychological state of a composer is quite different from the improviser, even though we're both engaged in making music. So they're very different human tasks.
What if some goof up happens? How do you?
We'll request you to say to the mic. Yeah.
What if some goof up happens, and how do you make it up? Make up the suppose you've missed something. How do you work on that?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that when it comes to do you miss something, in a way, you're always going to miss things in the film because it's not possible to play everything, and of course one doesn't want to. So you're both sort of feeling the film and letting your emotional response to the film guide you, but also looking at the screen and sometimes choosing what to play. So, for example, in an action sequence, you're both responding to the impact of the screen, but also a bit of your mind is sort of a little bit detached, judging how far to go, when to pull it back, whether the pace you've set is absolutely right, whether you need to speed up. So there's a little bit of sort of critical intelligence in there. So if you like, sort of hearing yourself and just checking that it's right. But there's always there will always be things missed. I think the thing about improvisation is it's always imperfect and it's always unrepeatable. But the spontaneous liveness of it, the fact of a human being there sort of feeling the film with the audience, it's a slightly different value system from composing. So composers can reach perfection, ideally, by changing and editing, but the improviser has to accept warts and all what happens, and that's so it's that different psychological attitude to making something.
Any sound film you want to mute and improvise the sound of that film?
Yeah, well, you can. There have been experiments with taking sound films and stripping away the music, the sound, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There are films that could work that way. Bergman's Persona would be an interesting experiment. Hitchcock's Vertigo would be an interesting experiment to do that way. But there are real differences with silent film storytelling where it's just images, and then storytelling which uses recorded sound. There's different ways of using images. So it doesn't always. It only works occasionally, I think, to do that.
Yes.
Hi,
Hello.
Jonny, would you, before you go for a performance, would you get a chance to watch the film before and sit back and just make a mental note of what you would be playing?
Yeah, it varies. Sometimes a film that I'm playing I know very well. All the films where I'm playing here I've played before. And while I couldn't tell you now what order the scenes come in tonight's film, I've played it half a dozen times, so I know what's happening. What I do like to do is just have it's possible to play a film through at 4 or 5 times the speed and just be have a quick reminder of what happens in the order that it happens. Sometimes have a little look at a scene that I feel I'd like to have a fresh look at, compared to the last time I played it. So sometimes I'm very aware of. There's a very difficult scene in Pandora's Box. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. There's a very difficult scene, and I always think, oh, nearly, but that's still not quite right. So, as I've been having a look at the difficult scene that I always find quite complicated. So every time you go back to a film, it's like a sort of rematch with the film, or another attempt to climb the mountain. So I do sometimes do that, but it's also quite frequently I play a film that I've never seen before and don't get to watch beforehand. Because some silent films are very hard to see. They don't exist on DVD or Blu-ray or in a digital file. They just are there's just one 35mm copy in an archive somewhere, and it's part of a film festival, and there's no opportunity to see it. So its title, its running time, its synopsis. Maybe there are a few still images you've been able to see, but otherwise, you just play what you see. So you can play without knowing the film at all. That happens quite a lot.
About today's film, since you said you've already played it a dozen times, based on
half a dozen.
All right, probably in future. Does what you perform or what you play vary? You think back, okay, the audience at the last place I played, you appreciated this. Maybe I could get it into a major scale or a minor scale, anything like that?
I think there are definitely things that recur from performance to performance. I think partly because improvisation does rely on one's habits and sort of musical personality. So the things that I like musically will tend to come out in my improvisations. And I was just listening to a performance of Pandora's Box that I did in 2018. So yes, I do sort of think, oh, that worked. But what you can't do, what I find I can't do, is make a plan to use this idea in this scene. Because if I make a note and stick it on the piano, then it gets in the way of responding to the film in the present tense. So I might have a little think before the film and maybe sort of hope that one or two things are lodged in my short-term memory. But I don't like to take notes or be thinking, oh, I must remember this. Because as soon as you're thinking, I must remember this, something is getting in the way of a true response to the film in the present tense. So, yeah.
Yes.
So my question to you, Jonny, says, has any director watched a silent movie he made when you were playing the music? And were there any, did he want any correction or in a different pattern?
They're all dead. They're all long gone. Which is both freeing and also the a great responsibility. That's the thing with silent. I'm collaborating with collaborating with people who are long gone. There are very few people alive today who were active in the silent era. So no. But that is an interesting type of responsibility, I think. A film composer today has to work with a director and work with a team to bring musical sound to a film. There's no one to tell me what to do. So there's a sort of responsibility to respect the film, I think. There's a responsibility to have respect for the making of the film, for the processes that led to the film.
If someone is making...
Someone
is making a silent movie and calls you for the music, would you do it? And have you done it before like that?
I've done a few new silent films, yes. And they're not made very often, but people do make them. Yes, particularly short ones. And it's very interesting to do that.
I just want to thank you. I was there for the show of the film.
Oh, thank you very much.
And felicitation I've seen.
Thank you.
Hi, just one question,
Hi.
sir. As we know that Sergei Eisenstein is from Russia and Hitchcock from Hollywood. So, post your experiment, what was the reaction of the native film industry, the Russian film industry as such, and the Hollywood as such, because I happened to see all the film of both the masters. So while watching the film in silent era, the silent thing zone with the subtitle, the reaction comes in later, action comes first. And when you play the silent music along with the film, so what was the native industry's reaction to it?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. What could you
The
just...
Russian film industry's reaction post
Yeah.
Sergei Eisenstein, this film is, and the Hollywood's reaction post
to the
film.
to the films at the time of their release.
Yeah. No, while when you play the music along with it, with your musical experiment.
Oh, do you mean...
When you play the accompaniment,
Yes.
when you accompany the film,
Yes.
he's asking what is the difference between the response of the Russian film industry
Yeah.
vis-a-vis the Hollywood.
The response of the film industry?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't really know anything about the Russian film industry, I'm afraid. Because I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
What I understand is that she's asking how is the response of the Russian film industry to your performance
Oh,
different, if it is.
I don't
that
think
of
they've heard me. So, no, I mean, it's audiences for silent film generally are. It's a subculture in film, and often the commercial industry today doesn't pay much attention to silent film. It's a slightly separate culture from today's filmmaking. So there are certain directors, certain film professionals who make a point of promoting silent film. I suppose the most famous of them in Britain and the United States would be Martin Scorsese, who goes out of his way to champion key silent film works, which of course he does for the whole history of cinema. But for the most part, the film industries don't connect with silent film exhibition. I think because it's so the silent film production is so historically distant from them. It's not something that they tend to really care about very much.
So what is your target audience? Who's your target audience then?
Oh, target audience is anyone who comes. I mean, it's
There could be an age group.
yeah. Well, no, it depends. I mean, it depends what sort of film you're doing. If with silent film comedy, those films work particularly well for a very broad age group. So when we're programming in the United Kingdom, Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton, slapstick comedy, I mean, those films we tend to get children and families, and a good age 5 to 95. It's they work that way. I think the silent film does communicate across all sorts of barriers because it's not language dependent. And yes, there are intertitles, but those can be easily translated. And in many silent films, there aren't many of them. I mean, there are some that have hardly any. There's not much text to read in last night's film, nor much in tonight's, because it's almost all storytelling with pictures and music. So I think there are films which make a really strong case for silent cinema, which sort of express the sorts of things silent cinema can do better than sound cinema. And I think those moments are to do with the sort of visceral power of films, to do with its sort of musical power, sometimes a sort of operatic quality. Last night's film, lots of really visceral, physical filmmaking. You feel the energy of it, you feel the movement of it. Tonight's is a different sort of film. It's much more about close-ups, about the camera sort of gazing at people in complex, dark, difficult relationships. And of course, silent film is more ambiguous in that way. It's more ambivalent because people aren't talking all the time. So there's space for people to be more intriguing, and I think that's part of the quality of tonight's film. And tomorrow night's film is just sheer thrill. It's the most brilliantly structured thriller plot. There isn't a spare second in the film, and so that's a film that works for pretty much any audience that's conscious and awake. It's but no, it's silent film can appeal to all sorts of audiences. Of course, one of the ways it can appeal to all sorts of audiences is with all the different types of music that can be put to it. I'm just one pianist, but there are many ways to bring music to a silent film, and lots of experiments are carried out with different types of music, which can be a very good way of encouraging different audiences into films. So I've heard films accompanied by English folk music, by electronic music, with experimental music, with full orchestras, all sorts of things.
Thank you very much for your music yesterday. I think most people enjoyed listening to you
Thank
and
you.
also viewing the film. Since you mentioned that it is mostly improvisation all the time and spontaneous what you do, but do you keep any track of any composer when you do a music for any film?
Do I keep track
Yeah.
of my own?
Yeah, I mean, some famous composer in your mind, like...
Oh, I steal all the time. I'm always stealing. Every improviser steals. Any improviser who denies stealing is a liar. Some of it happens unconsciously because when I hear so much music all the time, and there's all sorts of things that come out that have been played before. But I do borrow techniques from film composers. Yes, absolutely. And sometimes they're quite obvious, who I'm borrowing from. But so much of what I need as an improvising pianist has been established by composers for opera. So I sort of Verdi, Puccini, from musical theatre composers, and from the great film composers. So I listen to quite a bit of film music, and of course orchestral film music is quite different from playing at the piano. So you have to sort of work out how to realize something at the keyboard. It's quite different. But yes, I borrow all the time, and I think that in a way, as an improviser, you want to have as much music in you as possible, so that when you're just with the film, all of the things you need can come out through the fingers. Yes, and lots of it is stolen.
I think
respectfully stolen.
I think we will make it the last question since the next
in a silent
guest.
film, you'd see that so the audience gets information from the visual and intertitles. When you give music, then you are introducing another way of receiving information for the audience.
Yeah.
Then that essentially changes the meaning of what's happening on the screen, because you are telling the audience what's happening and how to respond to that. So essentially, don't you think that the film itself changes for the audience when you give music so how do you see that since you have been mentioning that it's a you see it as a collaboration rather than just
Yeah.
So do you think that every time you play to a film it changes?
Yes, it does, and I think there is a sort of responsibility that's involved, which as a musician working with a film, everything I do changes the film. Everything I do, or everything I play, imposes a reading of the film upon the audience, and that is, I think that's a responsibility. And so it's important to play with respect for the film and to be essentially I place myself in the position that the audience is in. In a way, I'm the audience's representative, offering a shaping of the film. It is, whatever music you add to a film will change it. And every time I play a film, it's different. So it's like a sort of musical commentary that's overlaid across the film. And yes, it inevitably changes it. And that's, for me, I play for films because I love the films. It enables me to bring together my love for the films and the fact that I love playing the piano. So I think if you don't love the film, if you don't respect the film and respect the audience, then those are the essential preconditions, I think, to doing it successfully. Because you can't, and sometimes if you're improvising jazz, a lot of jazz is about showing off. It's about displaying virtuosity. Sometimes with accompanying a film, you're doing very simple things sometimes, and you have to do what the film needs. Think about what the film what are the missing elements in the film? What can you bring to the film that will help it to work for its audience here and now? And that has to be the sort of guiding idea of improvising to film.
Actually, we have another press conference lined up, and the guests have arrived. So I think we would like to ask one last question. Okay.
Just yesterday, since I asked you, you have done some 5 similar films.
Mm-hmm.
5 shows of this same film, yesterday's film, or other films?
Oh, I mean, the films we're doing here, I've played them all several times. I played Blackmail 7 or 8 times, and Pandora's Box 5 or 6 times. So it's lovely to come back to a film because you're never, as an improviser, you're never finished with a film, I think. There's always something new to find. There's always something. I mean, last night, there were all sorts of things in Battleship Potemkin that I hadn't noticed before, which was lovely. So, no, you're never, I don't think one's ever finished as an improvising pianist. And tonight's film is really complex and demanding. So I think if I keep playing it until the day I die, I don't think I'll be finished with Pandora's Box. Yeah.
So I think we will close on that note, and we hope that the screening today of Pandora's Box and Blackmail tomorrow would be equally enthralling and inspiring for everyone and enriching for you as well. We are very grateful for your having come here, and we hope that your tryst with the silent film and this admixture of silence, film and music continues, and it inspires us to look into this power of silence in this today's busy world. And once again, we welcome you to the 50th edition of the festival, and wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Many thanks. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Hi.